Good morning, all of you.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes,
Good morning, ma'am.
yes, better. Yes, good morning. Okay, so today, in continuation with the same chapter, Nationalism in India, we'll have a look at the Salt March and the Civil Disobedience Movement. Now, why Salt March? Because Mahatma Gandhi saw in salt a powerful symbol that could unite all Indians. Now, salt was a thing that was used by all, rich and poor alike. So, that is why the Salt March. Now, on 31st January 1930, Mahatma Gandhi he sent a letter to Viceroy Lord Irwin, and he stated 11 demands in that letter. And now some of the demands were of general interest, like general interest of the people, the general welfare of the people, and then some were specific demands. Now those demands range from peasants to workers to traders to industrialists. Now why it was that the idea was to make the demands wide ranging so as to bring all sections of people together in this movement, and so that all could identify with the movement and all could be brought together. And now the most important of all these demands was the abolition of the salt tax. Now, like I said, salt was something that was consumed, that is used by all, poor and rich alike, and it is one of the most essential items of food. And now the British government they had a monopoly over the production and the sale of salt. That meant only the Britishers they could produce salt and they could sell salt, and on top of it there was a high tax also on the salt. And according to Gandhiji, this salt tax it showed the most oppressive face of the Britishers, that they could even tax such an essential item of food. And so Mahatma Gandhi's letter to Viceroy Lord Irwin, it was like an ultimatum. And so, what was said in the letter, that if the demands were not met by 11th March, then the Congress will start a civil disobedience campaign or a civil disobedience movement. That was like if they do not listen or fulfill the demands, then they will deliberately defy the laws. Now, Lord Irwin he was not willing to negotiate on that, and so Mahatma Gandhi he started his famous Dandi March, and he started it with 78 of his trusted volunteers, and the march was over 240 miles from Gandhiji's ashram in Sabarmati to the Gujarat coastal town of Dandi. And so the volunteers they walked for 24 days, uh, at an average of, you could say, 10 miles each day. And thousands of people they came to hear Mahatma Gandhi on the way wherever he stopped. And so, and Gandhiji he told them what he meant by satyagraha and what he meant by Swaraj, and he asked the people to peacefully defy the British. And then on 6th April he reached Dandi, and there he broke the salt law by making salt by boiling sea water. So this marked the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. And like I always say that Gandhiji he was a very very smart and very intelligent man. Now there were 11 demands in that letter. He could have chosen anyone, but if he could have chosen any one of those things, then only that section of people would have been interested in this movement. And that is why he chose this salt tax or salt law to break, to start the civil disobedience movement with, so that all sections of society, all groups of people, they will come and join this movement. Now what was different in the civil disobedience movement from the non cooperation movement? In the civil disobedience movement, people were now not only asked to not cooperate with the Britishers as they had done in 1921 and 22, but now they also had to break the colonial laws. Again, we don't mean that you go on breaking all the laws, we mean the colonial laws which were discriminatory towards the people. So thousands in different parts of the country, they also broke the salt law, and they manufactured salt, and they demonstrated in front of the government factories. And as the movement it spread on, so foreign cloth was boycotted, and liquor shops they were picketed. Peasants they also, now it is deliberate defying of laws. So peasants they refuse to pay the revenue and also the chowkidari taxes. So it is defying of the laws. Now why they did not pay revenue? Because the revenue rates were very high, and that is why they refused to pay the revenue and the chowkidari taxes. And the village officials they also resigned, and in many places people also violated the forest laws. They went into the reserve forest to collect wood and also to graze their cattle. So throughout the country people were deliberately, they were peacefully defying the colonial laws. Now the colonial government, the British government, they also began to be anxious and worried about all these developments, and they started to arrest the Congress leaders one by one. And when they started to arrest the Congress leaders, now this led to clashes with the people. And when Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was a disciple of Mahatma Gandhi, when he was arrested in April 1930, so crowds means people who were angry, they got very angry, and they demonstrated in the streets of Peshawar. And they even, they were armored police cars also. But the people, they still faced all that, and they were ready to face everything, and they were protesting and all that. And so they faced armored cars, and they also faced police firings, and as a result many were killed. And a month later Mahatma Gandhi, he was also arrested, and as a result the industrial workers in Sholapur, they attacked all symbols of British authority. And so that included the police posts, municipal buildings, law courts, railway stations. So everything that symbolized British rule, it was attacked by the people when Mahatma Gandhi was arrested. Now the British government, they got really frightened, and so they also responded. They reacted back with brutal repressing the people, and peaceful satyagrahis, even when they were peacefully protesting, then also they were attacked. Women and children, they were beaten up, and about 1 lakh people were arrested. Now we know that Mahatma Gandhi, he was again all sorts of violence. And so in such a situation Mahatma Gandhi, he once again decided to call off the movement. And so he entered into a pact with Irwin on 5th March 1931, and this was known as the Gandhi Irwin Pact. And according to this pact, Mahatma Gandhi, he consented to attend the second round table conference. Now the first round table conference, the Congress did not attend, and so it was a failure. And so Mahatma Gandhi, he called off this civil disobedience movement, and he promised that he will attend the second roundtable conference. And in return the British government, they agreed to release all the political prisoners. And so in December 1931 Gandhiji, he went to London for the conference, but nothing worked out. The negotiations, the discussions, they broke down. And so he returned disappointed. And when he came back to India, he discovered that the British government, they have started a new cycle of repression here again. And Ghaffar Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru, they were both in jail, and the Congress, it also had been declared illegal. And many measures have been imposed to prevent public meetings and demonstrations and boycotts. So public expression, now they were banned on public expression also. And so with great apprehension, with now he relaunched the civil disobedience movement. So apprehension means he was still doubtful, he was anxious, worried that whether to again relaunch the civil disobedience or not. But still with great doubt and apprehension, he again relaunched the civil disobedience movement. So for a year the movement continued, but by 1934 it has lost its momentum, because one started, then again called off, and then again started. So the next time it was started, many people, they did not have so much interest in that, as we'll see just now. So now we'll see that how the people they participated in the civil disobedience movement. So we'll have a look at the different social groups that participated in this civil disobedience movement, and now why the people joined this movement. Because the different groups of people they joined this movement because they all have their own set of demands, what they wanted out of this movement. And so what were their ideals, and what Swaraj meant to these different social groups, as we have seen in the case of non-cooperation movement. So the same we'll see in the case of the civil disobedience movement also. Let's see which groups participated in this movement. So in the countryside, means in the village side, the rich farmer communities like the Patidars of Gujarat and the Jats of Uttar Pradesh, now they were quite active in this movement. And these people were producers of commercial crops. What are commercial crops, by the way?
Crops which are grown just for selling and for commerce.
Yes, Vinayak?
Crops which are grown to sell in the market.
Okay, for commercial purposes, all right, for selling purposes. So because these people were producers of commercial crops, and these they were hard hit, they were hit badly by the depression, the trade depression, and the falling prices. And the money that they had in their hands, now it disappeared. And so now these rich peasant communities they found it difficult to pay the revenue to the government. And the government they were taking high revenues, and so now these people, as the money in their hand it vanished, so now they found it difficult to pay the revenue. And the government they refused to reduce the revenue, and this led to resentment or disappointment, disagreement among the people. They were dissatisfied with all this, and so these rich peasants they became enthusiastic supporters of the civil disobedience movement when it was launched. And so they organized their peasant communities. And even at times when those members who were not very willing, reluctant, those who were not very willing to participate in the boycott programs, they even forced those reluctant members to participate in these programs. And now for these rich present communities, the fight for Swaraj, now it was a struggle against high revenue. So for them, Swaraj meant that there won't be high revenues. But these people were deeply disappointed when this movement was called off in 1931. And this was done without the revenue rates being revised. So the revenue rates did not come down, and the movement was called off without that. And so when the movement was again relaunched in 1931, many of these peasant communities they refused to participate. First they joined very enthusiastically, and they even forced the people who were not willing. But when the movement was first called off without revising the revenue rates, so the next time the movement was restarted or relaunched, they were not much interested in that. Okay, so these were the rich peasants. Now we move to the poor peasants. Now the poor people, now they were simply not interested in lowering of the revenue demand. Now most of these poor people they were tenants, and they have rented land from the landowners, and from they were cultivating those rented lands. And now the economic depression it continued. Now this is the time 1930s we are talking about. And if you remember last year when we did Hitler, so this was the time of the great economic depression which was felt worldwide. And so during this time, as the depression continued and the cash incomes of the people they diminished, they became less. And so when the rich peasants they were finding it hard to pay the revenue, so what would be the condition of the poor peasants? So they also found it very difficult to pay even their rent, and they wanted that the rent which they had not paid to the landlords, it should be remitted or it should be cancelled. And so these poor peasants they joined some other movements also, which were often led by the socialists and by the communists. And now but the Congress, it was apprehensive, it was fearful of taking up issues concerning the poor peasants. Why? Because they thought that it would upset the rich peasants and the landlords, and the rich peasants and the landlords were already supporting Congress in this particular movement. So they were doubtful that whether they should take up the demands of these poor peasants, because it was they wanted that the unpaid rent, it should be remitted, it should be cancelled. And so they thought that they were not sure whether to take up their demands, and so the Congress was unwilling to support the no rent campaign in many places. And so the relationship between the poor peasants and the Congress, it was quite uncertain in this particular movement. Okay, so those were the peasants. Now we move to another social group. Now, what about the business classes? Now, how did they relate to the civil disobedience movement? Now, during the First World War, the Indian merchants and industrialists, they had made huge profits, and they had become very powerful, because when the Britishers and all, they were busy with now this you have done in the first chapter, age of industrialization, that during the war years, the Indian industrialists, they had a huge home market to cater to. And so that during this time they had made huge profits, and they have become quite powerful. Now they wanted to increase and expand their business, and they reacted against the policies of the colonial government that restricted their business activities. They wanted an expansion of their businesses, but because of the policies and laws of the British government, they were not able to do so, because those policies and laws of the colonial government, they restricted the business activities of the Indians. So what were the demands of this group? They wanted protection against the imports of foreign goods. They did not wanted foreign goods to be imported, because if foreign goods would be imported here, then there would be a competition. And many times these foreign goods, they were made by machines, so their price was less as compared to that which was made in India. And so they wanted protection against the imports of foreign goods, and they wanted the rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio that would discourage imports. Now they wanted that like rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio. Now what that meant was that if you exchange sterling or a pound for rupees and rupee for pounds, how much money will it take? And if the value of pound, it increases, it increased, the value of sterling, it increased, then the people had to give more Indian rupees to get that sterling, or for that particular 1 pound of 1 pound. So what it basically meant, that if the value of sterling was increased, then that will discourage the imports. Why? Because for the same thing, now the people here, they will have to give more money. So when they'll have to, something which they were being able to buy at say rupees 75, now they'll be paying 100 rupees for that. And so obviously that would discourage the import. So that is what they wanted. And then to organize their interest, they formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920, and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Congress and Industries, FICCI, in 1927. Now these were led by prominent industrialists of the time, Purushottam Das, Thakur Das, and G.D. Birla. And so these industrialists, they were against the colonial control of on Indian market. The colonial government, they controlled the Indian market, and they did not allow the people here to trade freely, as we have done in the age of industrialization. And if you remember that, and so these people supported the civil disobedience movement when it was first launched, and they even gave financial assistance, and they refused to buy or sell imported goods. And most of the businessmen, now for them, let's see what Swaraj meant. Now they came to see Swaraj as a time when the colonial government's restriction on business, it would no longer exist, and trade and industry would flourish without any constraints. So for these business classes, these industrialists and traders, Swaraj meant that there will be no restrictions on business, and that industry could flourish without any constraints or without any bounds or limitations. But after the first roundtable conference, it was a failure. Congress did not attend, so obviously nothing came out of it. Now the second roundtable conference, it was also a failure. And the business groups, now after the failure of the second roundtable conference, they were not so enthusiastic. Like, all were not as enthusiastic as they were before, and they were even doubtful, because they thought that now militant or violent activities could spread. And like, they were also worried that if the business would be disrupted for long, then obviously the people will lose. How long will you not participate in the business activities? How long will you go on losing money? And so, like, they were also worried about the long disruption of business. And at the same time, they were also you could say apprehensive about the growing influence of socialism among the youngest members of Congress. Now, socialism is, under socialism, what they say, that the means of production, they should be in control, or the means of production, distribution and wealth, it should be regulated by community. The means of production and wealth, it should be regulated by community and not by few individual peoples. So this socialism was against capitalism, and here we are talking about the capitalist. And so that is why these peoples were little apprehensive. They did not know whether to support Congress or not, because they saw that many of the younger members of the Congress, they promoted socialism. Now, so these were the the big businessmen, the traders, and the merchants, the big ones. And now we'll see that what about the people who worked in these factories and mills. Now the industrial working classes, they did not participate in the civil disobedience movement in large numbers. They participated only in few places, like in the Nagpur region. Now why? Because when the industrialists, they came closer to the Congress, so the workers, they remained distant, because they knew that if the industrialists and they were closer to the Congress, so obviously their demands would not be met, so they remained distant from the Congress. But in spite of all that, some workers, they did participate in the civil disobedience movement. And so they adopted some of the measures of the Gandhian program. And like, they boycotted the use of foreign goods. And but they used it for their own demands, and they used it as part of their own movements. Now what they wanted, their movement was against low wages and the poor working conditions. So they boycotted and all, but they wanted that their demands should be met, and which were against low wages and poor working conditions. So there were strikes by railway workers in 1930 and by the dock workers in 1932. Then in 1930, thousands of workers in the Chota Nagpur tin mines, they wore Gandhi caps, and they participated in protest rallies and boycott campaigns. But here again, the same thing happened. The Congress, it was reluctant, it was not willing to include the workers' demands as part of the program of this movement, because it felt that if they will take up the demands of the working classes, then this will alienate or isolate the industrialists and divide the anti-imperial forces. Now they knew the same thing that happened in the case of the rich peasants communities and the poor peasants. So the same thing happened among the rich businessmen, the capitalists, and the working classes, because the working classes thought that if the industrialists, they are nearer to the Congress, then obviously their demands will not be met. And the Congress, it was also apprehensive that if it would take up the demands of the working classes, then the industrialists and all, they will lose their the Congress will lose their support. And then it will also divide the forces, because these rich communities, these businessmen, the capitalists, they were also financing, they were giving finance to the Congress. Now another important feature of the civil disobedience movement, it was a large scale participation of women. So women participated on a large scale in the civil disobedience movement. Now during Gandhiji's salt march, many women, they came out of their homes and they listened to him. So whenever he stopped on the way, many thousands of women, they used to come out of their houses to listen to him, and they participated in protest march. They also manufactured salts, they picketed shops which were selling foreign cloth or liquor. Many even went to jail. And now who were these women who participated in the civil disobedience movement? Now in urban areas, these women, they belong to the high caste families, and in rural areas, these women came from the rich peasant families. So when Gandhiji, he gave the call that it was also the duty of women to serve the nation, so many women, they came out of their houses and participated in the various movements and protests, and even many went to jail. But though there was an increase in the public role of the women, but that did not mean that there was a far reaching change in their position also in the society, because Gandhiji, he was of the view that it was the duty of the women to be concerned about the home and hearth, be concerned about home and family and all that, and to be good mothers and good wives, and that was all. And for a long time, the Congress, they were not willing to give any position of power to the women within the Congress organization, and they simply wanted their symbolic presence. They just wanted women to be there, but they were not willing to give any position to the women. Okay, understood till here?
Yes, ma'am.
Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
all right. So for today, I'll stop here.